Welcome to OpenFrame, a podcast by Pixieset, the place for photographers and other creatives to have inspiring, honest, and uplifting conversations.
So James Simmons, International Wedding Photographer of the Year 20. Who freaking knows what it was? What year was it? 2020?
2020. It's old news now, buddy.
2020, the year the world exploded. How convenient to get such an accolade right when everything turns to shit. But you are...
It's because no one was shooting weddings, mate.
I was the only one that applied for this.
In their rooms. Yeah. Full Stephen Bradbury trick. Yeah.
Amazing. You're known not just for taking out that award, which is a pretty radical one out of everyone on the planet to get that. But you're known for your pretty amazing way of seeing the world, incredible photojournal chops that come from a background, not just in weddings, but all of this incredible personal work you've done. And I feel like a lot of people would also know you for your unique way of seeing light, which is just, I'm perusing your website now and it's just cracking, mate. So thanks for coming on, bro, and spending a bit of time with us. How you going? How's your mustache going?
Mate? Yeah, good. Recently just rearranged the setup. So I got a fresh slug on my upper lip now.
we need to make sure there's like a before and after in the show notes as a GIF or something, because it's pretty mighty. Tell us a little bit about what you do, mate, how you see the world, why you shoot weddings, and how, I guess, what you want to give when you're shooting other people. And
I came to weddings probably pretty early on. It was about 2009, 2010. Yeah, I was shooting for a portrait studio, and they were trying to cycle up their weddings. And I'd done a lot of families, and I mean, they did a lot of genres at these studios. They did nudes and pets, sometimes nudes and pets in the same shoot. Yeah, it was pretty weird. But it was getting a bit old because it was just all studio, that typical black and white setup. It was great to kind of cut my teeth on it and get the numbers up and the shooting time, because we'd often shoot like 8 sessions on a Saturday. So, we really had to kind of pump it out, and while trying to maintain some, relatively high quality of work. But the opportunity came up with them to shoot a wedding. And I'd never really thought I'd ever want to shoot weddings. I think the idea of weddings was a bit stressful. Especially when I was at uni, it was a bit of a dirty word back then as well. 2006, everyone's like, oh, kind of poo-poo weddings. It was all about fashion and advertising, or just being an artist, really. And even the lecturers were like, oh, don't be a commercial photographer. You'll feel like you've been absolutely reamed, which is probably still true. But I was right into the photojournalistic side of things. I thought I was going to change the world by, chasing down some stories in war-torn countries. And, we spent a bit of time over in Bangladesh with the photojournalistic school over there, Pathshala. And we were able to kind of sink our teeth into some quality stories and really explore that way of telling a story. So it was really eye-opening, and it was really amazing to be able to work with the Bangladeshi students on their view of the world compared to just the view of the West on their world, which would often result in just stories about poverty and sad stuff. Whereas they were living and breathing it, and they wanted to find the good in the world, or stuff that really mattered, not just look at us, we're poor. So that was really eye-opening. But I fell in love with that way of telling a story, and I guess that in combination with probably the studio portraiture that I was doing. A lot of it was with a single diffused softbox, like light, And I really learned how to manipulate that one light really well and be able to do a lot of things with that one light. So, that education plus the photojournalism and I guess the art history and theory from university was a pretty good combination to kind of get me going. And then when I jumped into a wedding, I kind of realized that it was all of those things. It was, you could, turn it into a bit of photojournalism. You could turn it into your creative portraiture. It was a bit of fashion at the end of the day. And then there was like a little bit of still life commercial sort of work, for detail shots and stuff like that. Back then though, it was very much shot with stuff. The studio had just transitioned from shooting film into digital. So it was still very much steeped in like film shooting tradition, where they only wanted an X amount of frames. We had to shoot in JPEG because they just wanted it done quickly. Because if you shot it on film, it would just go to the lab and come back, and that was all you had to do. Now with this digital process, it was actually creating more work for them. So they were just like, nah, screw this raw thing, just do it in JPEG, shoot it like you were shooting black and white film. So just make sure you manage your highlights,
right,
and get it right. Get it right. We only want 400 frames max. Cull it down to like 300, and then that's your wedding. So it was very stagnant to begin with, and early on, I was influenced. I was heavily influenced by all the Magnum sort of style photographers and that photojournalism. So I was trying to introduce a little bit of that, and with that mindset, I actually, that's when I first came across Dan O'Day, Sam Blake, Kelly Tunney, those guys who were in the wedding game probably a year or so earlier, or a couple of years earlier, and they started producing this really cool work that was just heaps different. And I saw that, and I was like, see, they're doing it. They're doing it. I was like, that's the shit that I'm vibing with, and so that gave me like the courage to see that someone else is doing it, and just to know that I could do it my own way, and it didn't have to be the way that the studio had showed us. Because it wasn't until I went out on my own that I really leaned into that and went, I can do this differently. It doesn't have to be the same as the way that it was always done. The studio did a lot of big kind of traditional weddings as well. And, when I went out my own, I started to pick up kind of more unique things, little backyard weddings, just stuff that was, a bit different to what I was already shooting. So it provided a platform to kind of flex those creative differences that I had in my mind that I, wanted to chase down. So that it was really good, because it really, weddings, they ticked a lot of creative boxes for me. And at the same time, it really justified why I was photographing as well, because you're giving someone an artifact of their life that they will, pass on to their family, and they will cherish that stuff for years. Whereas, a lot of the stuff that we can produce is fodder for content these days, and it gets just gets scrolled through, and it's next, whatever.
James,
are you
saying you're not a content creator?
Oh, mate, it's a bit of a dirty word, isn't it? But
you're not.
It is a dirty word. But yeah, no, man, I'm hopeless at that stuff. I definitely don't see myself as a content creator, because it's more than just content to me, They're kind of, like I said, they're artifacts of people's lives.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it could all be grouped into as content as well. It just depends the way you treat it. But yeah, no, the weddings were good in so many facets for me. Also, I didn't have to risk my life or limb traveling to a war-torn country. And you had an abundance of clients that were ready to pay, what it was you needed to charge. So whereas trying to sell a story to National Geo was probably a damn sight tougher, especially over that period as online forums and all smartphones and stuff started to kick
citizen
in.
journalism.
So the way that newspapers were working with their staff and all of that landscape was just changing so dramatically. All of a sudden you went from being a photojournalist to a journalist and a videographer and a photographer. And then you might have a chance. So the multitasking thing was paramount, and that was pretty full on. But yeah, I don't know what else. What else are we chatting about here?
You mentioned something. You mentioned something earlier that Dan and Kelly and all that about how that gave you the courage to see stuff a little differently. And I think that's such an interesting point. And I think back to a couple of key meetings with. One example is collaborators, an artist who I go and see and I dare to hit up and go, hey, can I work on a music video with you? And that kickstarts a 10-year working relationship. And I always think, what if I did that more, like once a month even, like who knows where that could go. I'm curious for you, when you said that you had that moment of being enabled, how important do you think it is that people find their own moment of enablement? And have you had more than that one? Like, are you looking for a new one? Do you seek them out often anyway? Like, how often do you refresh that bucket where you're challenged and inspired to get the courage to do something brand new again? The more years that tick over in this.
Yeah, well, I thought I was pretty good at like constantly looking for it. Like always having a level of anxiety that just kept me on my toes, so I would always push for some interesting imagery. I think, like, just more recently, what I'd noticed was that those pushes or those things that I was producing, they weren't dramatically different. I mean, I guess you'd argue that it was all in the same style, which is, a good thing. But sometimes, when you commit to something too hard, you get stuck in a bit of a rut. And if it's not on trend, especially in the wedding game, you can often get left behind. Not that you want to be chasing the trend, because that'll just do your head in, because they move on too quick. So you want to have your grassroots and foundations in something solid, which what I think is solid is that purest photojournalism. If you look at the Magnum photographers, those things have aged beautifully because they're just works of art. But it is what it is. It's got amazing. The content of the imagery tells a story. The graphics of it are visually appealing, and so it all comes together and works. When you're trying to be too trendy, obviously things can just fall down as soon as that trend's passed. But so if you kind of have your roots, anchored in something solid, you can always flirt with the edges and the fringes, the creative things that you accent it with, and the way that you go, oh, let's try this. Let's have a little play over here and see what happens over here. Well, this is a bit different, or I haven't done that before. You can always add those in, and it won't necessarily, completely fall flat, and age poorly, because the body of your work it's still anchored in something that's really, really honest.
Yeah.
So and I mean,
how are you, like, I guess, like, looking at those foundations that you love and are really solid? Like, how are you mentioned something earlier when we were chatting before the call about the whole, going back to being the student, and, what that means from a, I don't want to say strategic, but what that means from, like, a point of view of, like, how you change your habits and how you change your idea of, maybe where you are in your own career. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're kind of, like, I guess, trying to change those foundations now for yourself, or question what they are a little more now that you're like, 10 years in, 12 years in? Shit.
Yeah. Well, I guess we've all had a bit of time to think over this pandemic, with finding ourselves a bit more available on weekends through cancellations, postponements, and restrictions. And whether it was a coincidence or not, I kind of had myself scared straight in wondering whether or not I was losing relevance. So that was probably the most poignant, turning point for me to maybe change my mindset a little bit.
That's a pretty big way of phrasing it. Like, it sounds pretty scary, to be honest.
Yeah. And, you're obviously your own worst critic. And, people I've talked to, they're like, oh, no, you're not losing relevance, mate. You're all good. But, they're not the ones that are living and breathing it, from your point of view, right? So, they only know as much as you tell them. Whereas, when you can look at your accounts and look at the amount of bookings that you've made and see what's booked in, so you know what I mean? Like, I was worried. Yeah, I actually got really worried that I was losing relevance. And well, that and the fact I just turned 40, or not just, last August turned 40. You kind of have this little midlife crisis sort of scenario, and you're like, holy crap! Like, you look around and the kids that are 20, they're literally, well, half your age, and they're talking a language I don't even understand anymore. And you're like, whoa, like, what do these emojis mean? Like, and you're like, how did that just happen? Like, that just shifted underneath my feet without me even knowing.
Yeah.
It's just like, how much relevance have I lost? And I really started to question things, and to take a long, hard look at myself and decide that I needed to just look at everything I was doing, from all of the client interactions, the branding side of things, the website, the way I was presenting my blog posts, the imagery that I'm shooting, like everything. Like, I kept saying to myself at the start of this, like when people would ask what I was up to, and I was like, oh, I'm starting a new business. It's in wedding photography.
Dude.
And they're like, what?
That is awesome.
And yeah. So I just look at it as in, like, my previous career is all of the experience that I've got to take into this new career.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a bit of a joke. It's the same thing, but that was the mindset. I really wanted to change and have a really definitive pivot into, not necessarily go away of the heart and soul of it, but just to tighten up, just like, re-engage with, what's out there and what's happening, what is current, and, what people are looking for and all that sort of stuff. And it kind of led me down the path of really dialing in my client experience, the information and communication with my clients, and re-looking at the website. I've got a whole new brand new website up now.
Dude,
so
it looks sick.
It's a bit more fun. It's definitely a bit more fun. And then taking over the studio as well to myself, and I'm currently renovating that and kind of fit it out with a commercial shooting space so we can do things that aren't events. So there's a little bit of a plan B, or something else, a side hustle, I suppose. But yeah, just decking it out in like a proper, Jimin's factory. Like it's going to be my Jimin's fun factory.
Do we have to have a mustache like yours to enter?
Yeah, well, you'll definitely need a vibe, I reckon, to fit in there. Otherwise, it's you're gonna have people running for the hills. No, we've gone through a massive 80s vibe in there. So yeah, probably not to everyone's taste, but it's gonna be fun. Lots of block color, Memphis designy sort of stuff. Yeah,
it's so sick.
Cartel.
So fun, and I love what's underneath that too. You kind of I don't know. You kind of said it was tongue in cheek, the whole starting a new business thing, but it's also That's like startup mindset right there. Yeah. Like if you're grinding from the
Yeah,
ground up, how are you going to do things? But the wealth of like
absolutely.
12 years of experience, like what a powerful little spot to be in.
Yeah, definitely reinvigorated that grittiness that you need when you first start, just to grind things out and to just accept in your brain that you're going to be more busy than usual, because you just have to do more. You know, you have to rewrite things. You have to, you know, find more, you know, images to market with. You need to, do so much stuff, resource, engage with more people. I'm outsourcing way more stuff now though.
Right.
So that's helping a lot. So I really looked at my marketing and, you know, how I was using Instagram and all that sort of stuff, and have got some help. So I've got a VA who is he's basically blogging every wedding for us. He's sending that stuff out to all the vendors. He's, you know, throwing like Instagram carousels together for us, so I can just quickly, you know, grab those and post those when needed. And all the stuff that just takes ages, that I always found that I'd never had time for, like in the grind of getting through, you know, the edits and you know, inquiries and all that sort of stuff. It all fell away. So I realized that I wasn't doing any marketing whatsoever. So I had to dial that in. But yeah, this year and looking at the scenario as being a new business, a full new startup, that just put me in the full-blown student mindset. So I said to the crew, the Common Folk crew, who I've often you know, helped out throughout the years with, you know, doing workshops through them and teaching a fair bit, that I don't actually want to do any teaching this year. That, like, you know, I want to take a back seat and learn from everyone else for once.
Amazing.
You know, so yeah, I just want to sit here and eat a massive bit of humble pie and just, you know, accept the fact that there's people out there that know more than me and are doing better things than me. And I don't want to have to try and pretend that, you know, I'm at the top of the game or anything like that. I just want to sit back and absorb some stuff and, you know, think about it critically and see where it all fits and see what I can do with it and see how I can develop the business and how I can grow as a photographer, rather than constantly trying to help other people to grow. It's a full bit of a selfish one, but it's kind of needed.
That's such a massive position to take, especially, you know, especially winning like massive gongs like that and having all the unique leadership that you've already been involved with. It's a massive call, pretty cool one. Like,
yeah, well, I got thrusted into that limelight pretty early on, like, you know, 2014. I kind of started to you know, be put in the limelight, and it was really stressful because it's still reasonably early on in my career, like only 5 years in really, and you know, I was pretty fresh faced, and all of a sudden to be, you know, kind of called whatever Australian Photographer of the Year or whatever it was, I found myself in a situation where I was under a lot of scrutiny, and you know, whatever posts were being made about me were in open forums where people could just, you know, talk shit about. So that was
really
pretty discouraging. Yeah, at some points.
Yeah,
I mean, most of it was good, and people would go into bat for me and stuff, which was super nice. I just learned pretty early on to not read some of that shit. But
so weird.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like, you know, some of my images were on Reddit and it just had like thousands and thousands of comments of just like
the hell?
Of how, you know, people discussing on how this image was lit, you know, and I'm just like,
holy shit.
It's so easy. It's like literally so easy. And I found this thing and people are like arguing. Like they don't even care about the photo anymore. They're just calling each other names. Like it's just like, what's going on?
Dude, you've reached peak internet. Weird. That's wild.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But yeah, you kind of just have to switch off a bit of that noise and just concentrate on what you're doing and make sure you're doing the things that you want to do and make you happy. And I guess the things that I was doing weren't necessarily making me happy because I don't think I was getting the results that I thought I needed. Even, not to say that I was producing bad work, but I was like, I think this needs to evolve.
Yeah, your standards are,
Um,
higher at any one time.
yeah, I'm definitely my own worst critic. But also, some of the stuff I was producing wasn't necessarily sustainable in the day-to-day, wedding that you'd shoot. You'd kind of have these really dramatic, cityscapes or whatever it was, and then you go shoot this real humble backyard wedding, and you're like,
Yeah.
fuck, what are they expecting here? Like,
Yep.
we're in a backyard. Just, but yeah, it's definitely I've had to humble and realize that you can only do so much with what you've got. And I mean, you can still work your magic, but you can only do your best with what you've got. And as long as that's anchored into something that you believe in, and for me, it was just all about natural interaction and expression. If that was my core thing that I was capturing for people, that was it was you couldn't really go wrong. You'd still find nice light, and you'd still find those moments. So.
And now you're out there kind of taking that, slower, more gentle kind of approach to evolution and becoming a student again, and filling your own cup. And it's usually like the last thing that we find time for. We never find time to reestablish and set our businesses up exactly as we want it, or they should be, because, as you know, once you're 1 or 2 years in, you're just on this runaway horse. Whether it's going the right or wrong direction, you're on the horse. And it's only when you have that stalling moment of like, hang on, what do I want this business to look like? What do I want the work and my client interfacing to look like? That you make that incredibly important choice of going, no, let's like jump off the freaking horse, say no to a few things. There's, a lot of culture of yes, say yes, yes, yes. Everything's got its time. And sometimes it's time to say no, right? And like, let yourself fill your cup.
The longer that you're in the game, sometimes the harder it is to change the direction of your business, because it kind of just if it's growing, if it's not set up perfectly from the start, you can often build kind of bad habits that are hard to shake, because that's just becomes part of the process. Like if you're stuck like editing, like culling and editing all your photos, it's really hard to stop and change that system when you're busy. Like if you're flat out in the middle of a season, you're like, holy crap, I'm drowning in editing. It is almost impossible to outsource it at that point, because outsourcing is going to put you back another month with that teething process. So yeah, the best thing to do is that anything you need to tweak on your business, smash it out in the off season, trial and test it. And when you think you're not busy, that's the time to go nuts.
That's great advice, mate. And you've been super generous with your time. I'd love to hear if you have one little bit of controversial advice to sign off on. As someone that's like just about to jump for the education pedestal of giving, we would just want to fleece you for one more little freaking nugget.
Controversial. Green can work as a colored light source on a bride.
Amazing. Smoke bomb. Thanks, Simmons. We'll let everyone meditate on using that one.
Everyone's gonna be like, bullshit, Simmons, that sucks.
Or there'll be a fucking green bride trend in the next 2 months, and you'll be like, suckers.
Dude, I literally just posted one.
And of course, you smashed it. Mate, where do we find you on the internets and the Instagrams? And we'll chuck all this in the show notes underneath as well.
Yeah, Instagram's probably the best place. It's just James Simmons Photography. Yeah, pretty much just Instagram.
Sweet. Bro, you're a legend.
Website's the same. Yep.
Love it.
Legend.